As time passes on in the world, society will continue to evolve. From cave civilizations of the past to the bustling city ecosystems of today, one primal instinct has always remained: fear. Fear is built into us, it helps protect us. But as of lately, one thing is certain: many have figured out how to use it against us. Tyrants, dictators, and established organizations in the past have not always had it out for our best interests in mind. Looking back in history, a pattern can be noticed when it comes to certain governing bodies, and this is where a divide becomes apparent between us today. Today I'm going to tell you about one of the biggest catalysts that has spread anti-government ideals to the mainstream, and one of the biggest botches to stain the history of the FBI. This is the incident at Ruby Ridge. "1983 was a year of change for the Weaver family. Randy and Vicki Weaver had purchased 20 acres of land just outside of the town of Naples, Idaho, in hopes of giving their children Sarah, Samuel, Rachel, and Elisheba a better life. Vicki Weaver had been having dreams about an apocalyptic scenario leading up to their move, which actually inspired Randy to build their home while Vicki homeschooled the children. However, it didn't take long for Randy to have a shadow tailing his movements. In 1984, Weaver had gotten into a land dispute with a neighbor by the name of Terry Kinnison. After losing a land claim dispute case, Kinnison wrote multiple letters to the FBI, Secret Service, and county officials claiming that Weaver had threatened to kill the Pope, then President Ronald Reagan, and Idaho Governor John V. Evans. These letters put the Weaver family on the federal radar, and on February 12, 1985, both Randy and Vicki were interviewed by multiple agents from the FBI, Secret Service, and the county sheriff's department. In their research, investigators had been informed that Randy was a member of the Aryan Nations, a white supremacist group which had regular meetings at a nearby Hayden Lake. He was also suspected of having a large weapon stash at his residence. But after much denial, Randy was never charged. Unbeknownst to them at the time, the investigators had been correct actually, as the Weavers had been to multiple Aryan Nation meetings, although Randy has stated multiple times that it was really only to support the ideals of resisting the government. In 1986, an investigation fell into the hands of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or the ATF for short. Weaver had fallen into a trap set up by an ATF informant working a separate investigation. Multiple times, Weaver had been discussing forming a rebel group and, according to the ATF, even sold the informant 2 sawed-off shotguns with barrels shorter than the legal requirement. After Randy had discovered who the informant truly was, the ATF mobilized to try to recruit him to their investigation, using the potential shotgun charges as leverage in exchange for information about the Aryan Nations. Weaver refused, and he was indicted in 1990 for making and possessing illegal weapons, but strangely not selling said weapons. He was arrested in January of 1991 and was told his trial would begin February 19th of 1991. Randy contacted probation officer Carl Rikens, who had actually mistakenly given him the wrong date for the trial. Rikens tried to rectify his mistake, but never heard back from Randy Weaver. He never showed up to the court date, and a bench warrant was put into motion even though there had been multiple mistakes on the part of the court. The judge upheld, and though a grand jury deliberated, an indictment for failing to appear was issued. Over the next couple of years, U.S. Marshals were tasked with capturing Weaver and began to build a plan to arrest him. Multiple attempts at contact with Weaver were unsuccessful, and He would approach any unfamiliar people and vehicles with guns drawn. A former Green Beret, Weaver didn't seem like he was going to go down without a fight, and his wife even said as much. Rumors also began circulating that shots had come from the property, with the target being a passing helicopter, and while no evidence was found for this, it began to fuel the worst that had yet to come. August 21st, 1992 was a warm summer's day. The sweat began to drip from the U.S. Marshals' collective foreheads as they navigated the land near the Weaver cabin. Inside was the entire Weaver family: Randy, Vicky, Sarah, Samuel, Rachel, and baby Elisheba, as well as a family friend named Kevin Harris, going about their day as if it had been no other. Meanwhile, a recon team consisting of Deputy U.S. Marshals Art Roderick, Larry Cooper, and Bill Deegan had been tasked with finding entry points for their plan of arresting Randy Weaver. Roderick began testing the dog's reaction by throwing rocks near the house to see how aggressive the animal may actually be. But this was a huge mistake. The Weaver's pet, Stryker, Samuel, and Kevin Harris emerged from the cabin, thinking they had potentially found an animal to hunt for some food. The marshals began to retreat, but it was too late. Stryker had already alerted Samuel and Kevin to their location. In an attempt to stay hidden, one of the marshals fired, killing Stryker. And like when you kick a hornet's nest, the air became full. Bullets rained between the two sides. Kevin Harris and Samuel began returning fire as Samuel turned to retreat. He was killed, shot in the back with a single bullet. In response, Harris fired back, killing Deputy Marshal Bill Deegan. As Harris retreated, marshals radioed back to their post. Harris didn't know it, but his final shot had just set the FBI, the ATF, and the police forces into overdrive. "11 days had passed as the FBI and the rest of the police forces, all under the command of Special Agent Eugene Glenn, tried to negotiate with the Weavers, but to no avail. Shoot-on-sight warnings had been adopted for anyone seen with a gun. As negotiators made their way to the cabin, an FBI sniper by the name of Lon Horiuchi opened fire on Randy Weaver, who had been seen trying to visit his son's body in the shed. He was wounded near his right armpit before running back to the house. Horiuchi laid the crosshairs on the retreating Randy, Sarah, and Kevin Harris. Firing a second shot, Horiuchi struck Vicky Weaver directly in the head, killing her instantly. She was holding the 10-month-old baby Elisheba when she died. The most disturbing thing about this entire scene was the way that Sarah describes it later on in an interview with the New York Times, stating,
"It took me a second to comprehend that Mom had just died and that it was parts of her that had hit my face."
When they got on the bullhorn and started asking for Mom to come out and have pancakes for breakfast with her kids, and wouldn't you want to do that with your children, sort of thing, it added, it's a cliche to say it added insult to injury, but it did.
The siege only ended after presidential candidate Bo Gritz came to the Weaver cabin and convinced him to surrender. Weaver and Harris were tried in the U.S. District Court in Boise, Idaho in April of 1993. Weaver was acquitted of all charges with the exception of missing his original court date and violating bail conditions. He was sentenced to 18 months and fined, though he only served 16 months. Kevin Harris was acquitted of all charges, and even though he was indicted for the first-degree murder of Deputy Marshal Bill Deegan in 1997, his charges were dismissed on grounds of double jeopardy. No one was ever charged for the deaths of Samuel and Vicki Weaver, though there have been multiple code of ethics and rules of engagement drafting changes since the incident at Ruby Ridge. The public backlash from this case was massive. People began questioning the government and taking up arms in their own militias. Riots even broke out. The Ruby Ridge incident set the way for the situation as the 1993 Waco siege raised anti-government sentiment to the front and mainstream. This incident even went as far as to fuel the motives behind the Oklahoma City bombings in 1995. The man behind them, Timothy McVeigh, cited that Ruby Ridge was one of the main reasons he wanted to attack the government and make them pay. After serving time and many civil lawsuits later, the Weaver family had recovered, with Randy even being remarried. If you haven't already, I definitely recommend searching up Sarah Weaver's interviews over the years as well. The emotion and heartbreak you hear behind her voice, it just really amplifies how something like this tragedy should have never happened in the first place. I hope now that they've at least begun to heal from this horrible past that they've left behind. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing to see the next upload. Remember that you're loved, and I look forward to broadcasting to your screens again next time. Sleep tight.
I'm aware of the bonds that were created today. When you told me that sure there's a way. The water's so still and my pain has gone away. The air is much cleaner after it rains.